The room is silent except for the faint hum of a refrigerator. Outside, the city moves with relentless rhythm, lights flickering like distant stars that are indifferent to the life within these walls. In this quiet, a man sits alone, staring at the blank page on his laptop. The cursor blinks at him, a metronome marking the time he has wasted without action. He tells himself he's too tired, too inexperienced, too unprepared. The thought of sending that email, making that call, stepping into the unknown, it all feels impossible. And yet deep down, there is a whisper, a faint, persistent tug, urging him forward, hinting at what might be if only he could release the invisible weight pressing him down. He is not lazy. He is not weak. But something feels off. Something inside him trembles with the awareness of potential unrealized. And it is this trembling, this quiet, gnawing dissatisfaction, that is the first sign of a fundamental truth. Confidence is not an innate gift. It is an inner alignment, a state of being forged in the crucible of choice, action, and self-recognition. Most people imagine confidence as a radiant force that lives in some lucky few. They see leaders, actors, innovators, those who stride forward unhesitatingly, and tell themselves, I could never be like that. But this is an illusion. Confidence is not a prize for the gifted. It is a habit, a skill, a way of relating to oneself. It is born not from external approval, but from repeated acts of trust, choosing, acting, and facing consequences without surrendering to fear. The man leans back in his chair and rubs his eyes. He remembers a time when life felt simpler, when ambition was not yet intertwined with self-doubt. But as the years passed, he began to notice patterns, small hesitations that grew into habits, quiet self-censorship that became routine, the subtle erosion of his belief in himself. He had learned to avoid discomfort, thinking that safety meant survival. And yet, in avoiding, he had only built walls around possibility, around freedom, around the raw joy of creation. The paradox of human psychology is that the very thing we resist most, fear, failure, uncertainty, is also the crucible that shapes strength. Every time we avoid a challenge, we reinforce our own limitations. And every time we face it, no matter how small, we carve a notch in our internal armor, proof that we are capable of standing in our own light. Consider the mind as a theater. On the stage, the self performs under the watchful gaze of the inner critic, a voice shaped by childhood, society, past failures. This critic is merciless, pointing out every flaw, every hesitation, every imagined inadequacy. And yet, this critic is not the enemy. It is a reflection, a map of what we have internalized, a mirror showing us exactly where our courage is absent. To silence it without engagement is to surrender a part of our humanity. True confidence does not silence fear. It acknowledges it, steps onto the stage anyway, and acts. There is a story here that plays quietly in the minds of all who feel the weight of unrealized potential. It is a story of hesitation masquerading as prudence, of perfectionism disguised as diligence, of procrastination dressed as strategy. These are the masks of self-doubt, each convincing us that the safest path is the one we do not take. Yet beneath these masks lies a persistent, unspoken question. Who would I be if I allowed myself to try? Psychology tells us that the human brain is wired to prioritize avoidance over exploration. Evolutionarily, this made sense. Survival demanded caution. But in the modern world, this wiring manifests as hesitation, as a chronic undervaluing of potential in favor of immediate comfort. The mind becomes a prison of what-ifs and not nows, and confidence, real unshakable confidence, seems forever out of reach. And still, the potential for it exists, not in the absence of fear, but in the cultivation of courage and self-trust. The man closes his eyes and pictures a moment when he acted despite fear. Perhaps it was minor, nearly forgettable. Raising his hand in class, asking a question in a meeting, saying no when he meant it. He remembers the tiny surge of pride that followed. That surge was not confidence in the popular sense. It was something quieter, but infinitely more powerful. The recognition that he could rely on himself, that he could act, and that the world would not shatter as a result. Confidence, then is revealed as a series of these micro-moments, fragments of integrity that accumulate over time into something solid, resilient, and undeniable. Philosophically, this aligns with the teachings of thinkers like Nietzsche and Jung. Nietzsche spoke of self-overcoming, the process by which an individual faces adversity, embraces discomfort, and transforms limitations into power. Jung described the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves we deny, and suggested that integration of these elements leads to wholeness. In both perspectives, the path to confidence is internal. It is not about imitating others or collecting accolades. It is about facing the unacknowledged parts of oneself and emerging with a coherent, integrated identity. And yet, this is precisely what most people avoid. We look outward for cues, for validation, for certainty. We measure our worth in likes, promotions, compliments, or the absence of criticism. But external metrics are fleeting, unreliable, and often irrelevant to the inner architecture of confidence. The true measure is whether we can trust ourselves to act, to make choices, to persist in the face of fear, even when no one is watching. The tension between illusion and reality becomes apparent. Society sells the image of the confident person as effortless, charismatic, and inherently talented. The truth is that confidence is usually invisible, internal, and earned through struggle. It is quiet. It is steady. It is resilient. And it is available to anyone willing to confront their hesitation and embrace the work of self-reliance. The man opens his eyes. The cursor blinks. The email remains unsent. The project unstarted. The decision unmade. And yet, for the first time in weeks, he notices the subtle tremor of possibility, a recognition that action is not the enemy, that discomfort is not defeat, that fear is not a permanent state, but a signal, an invitation to grow. He leans forward, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The next step is small, almost imperceptible, yet monumental. This is the nature of the beginning, silent, internal, invisible to the world, yet seismic in its impact on the self. Confidence is not a thunderous revelation. It is a whisper of alignment, a choice repeated moment by moment until it solidifies into a steady presence. And here, at the edge of hesitation, the first transition emerges, the recognition that confidence is not something one finds, it is something one builds. Not by removing fear, but by learning to act alongside it. Not by becoming someone else, but by becoming someone you can trust. The path forward is not prescribed, guaranteed, or easy, and that is precisely why it is transformative. The room remains silent. The city continues its indifferent rhythm. And yet, inside the quiet of that apartment, a shift begins. It is imperceptible, fragile, and yet undeniable. The tremor of self-trust stirring in the void of self-doubt. Confidence, as it turns out, is not a fleeting emotion that visits some and avoids others. It is a structure, an inner architecture forged slowly over time through deliberate choices, courageous acts, and honest self-reflection. To understand this, one must first understand the terrain within which confidence is built, the psyche itself, with all its contradictions, shadows, and hidden potentials. Imagine the human mind as a vast, dimly lit cathedral. In its arches and corridors reside every memory, every fear, every unacknowledged desire. Some chambers are well lit and orderly. These are the parts of ourselves we recognize, the skills we value, the experiences we embrace. But others are shadowed, forgotten, or suppressed, the parts we deny or disown. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the hidden terrain that, if ignored, sabotages our attempts at courage, creativity, and self-expression. Confidence, then, is not simply a matter of willpower or bravado. It is the product of integrating these shadows, of acknowledging the uncomfortable, the hidden, and the suppressed, and weaving them into a coherent self that can act with clarity and purpose. Every hesitation, every pang of self-doubt, every moment of fear is a signal pointing toward the shadow. To ignore it is to build a fragile confidence, one that can crumble at the first gust of adversity. But to confront it, to name it, to explore it with curiosity rather than judgment, is to begin the work of true inner strength. Each time we face a discomfort we would rather avoid, we lay a stone in the foundation of our inner architecture. Each time we take action in spite of fear, we extend a beam across the chasm of self-doubt. And slowly, imperceptibly, a structure emerges that can support our ambitions, our creativity, and our fullest potential. Nietzsche described this process as self-overcoming. Life, he suggested, is not a landscape to be navigated safely, but a crucible designed to forge strength through challenge. Each obstacle, each confrontation with pain, each moment of uncertainty is an opportunity to sculpt the self, to turn vulnerability into resilience, to transform weakness into competence. Confidence is not given. It is earned through struggle, through deliberate engagement with the realities of our existence. Modern psychology reinforces this understanding. Studies show that confidence is closely tied to competence, and competence is cultivated through repeated action. The human brain is malleable. Neuroplasticity ensures that skills, habits, and patterns can be strengthened or weakened over time, depending on the choices we make. In practical terms, this means that confidence grows not through waiting for inspiration, but through accumulation of experience. Every small step, sending an email, speaking in a meeting, taking on a challenge, is evidence. And evidence, in turn, is the currency of self-belief. The mind, once convinced of its own capability, begins to act differently. Actions and belief form a loop, each reinforcing the other, each strengthening the architecture of the self. Yet, this inner work is often obstructed by illusions. Society presents a distorted image of confidence as something external, a magnetic presence, a collection of accolades, a projection of certainty. Social media, cultural narratives, and even childhood experiences feed the misconception that confidence is a mask one must wear to be accepted. In reality, external markers are brittle, transient, and unreliable. A promotion, a compliment, or public admiration may uplift momentarily, but they cannot substitute for the deep, internal trust that comes from having faced fear and acted with integrity. True confidence is invisible to the world. It is quiet, steady, and resilient. Consider the contrast between internal and external validation. When confidence relies on external approval, it becomes fragile. A single criticism can destabilize it. A single setback can shatter it. But when confidence is rooted internally, in self-knowledge, in self-trust, in repeated demonstration of competence, it is far less vulnerable. It does not seek applause. It does not fear judgment. It exists as a grounding force, a presence that allows the individual to navigate the complexities of life with clarity and composure. This is where philosophy and psychology intersect. Jung teaches that integrating the shadow brings wholeness. Nietzsche insists that suffering and challenge are necessary for self-overcoming. Modern neuroscience confirms that repeated practice and deliberate action reinforce neural pathways that support competence and self-assurance. When these truths converge, they reveal a central principle. Confidence is not a matter of becoming fearless, but of becoming capable of acting despite fear. The architecture of inner strength also involves intentional discipline. Discipline is not punishment, it is commitment. It is a recognition that small, repeated acts of integrity, keeping promises to oneself, showing up when it is uncomfortable, doing what must be done regardless of emotional state, gradually reinforce self-trust. And self-trust, more than talent, charm, or luck, is the bedrock of authentic confidence. Each micro-commitment strengthens the inner foundation. Each consistent action adds another layer of resilience. There is also a rhythm to this construction, a balance between effort and reflection, action and pause. Too much external focus leads to anxiety, comparison, and fragile self-worth. Too little action leads to stagnation, avoidance, and erosion of trust in the self. The key is alignment. Acting in ways that are consistent with one's values, confronting challenges deliberately, and reflecting honestly on progress and setbacks. This is not easy. It is not glamorous, but it is effective. In cinematic terms, this is the moment of interior architecture being revealed. The hero is not yet triumphant, but the scaffolding is visible. The inner chambers are being organized, shadows integrated, pathways cleared. Each deliberate choice, each courageous act, is like a mason placing a stone, a beam, a cornerstone. And with each act, the edifice becomes stronger, capable of supporting more complex, ambitious, and meaningful expressions of the self. This process also reframes failure. Failure is no longer a verdict on character. It is a measurement of capacity. Each failure reveals where the structure is weak, where additional reinforcement is required, and where courage must be summoned again. Confidence grows not in the absence of failure, but in the navigation of it, learning, adjusting, persisting, and accumulating evidence of resilience. Finally, there is a profound truth that emerges from this exploration. The external world cannot create confidence, but it can offer challenges that serve as catalysts. The work is internal. Confidence is forged in silence, in reflection, in private commitment. It is built not from applause, but from the quiet acknowledgement that one is capable of standing in one's own presence, fully aware of strengths and weaknesses alike. And so, as the cinematic lens pans inward, the audience sees the blueprint of inner strength, the integration of shadow, the repetition of courageous acts, the alignment of action with values, and the gradual accumulation of self-trust. The stage is set for transformation, but the hero and the audience must understand that the journey is ongoing. Confidence is not a destination. It is a structure under constant refinement, a living architecture that supports the expansion of human potential. By the end of this section, the tension of the opening, hesitation, self-doubt, fear, begins to shift toward possibility. The foundation has been laid. The internal scaffolding is visible, and the viewer is prepared to witness the emergence of the breakthrough. The moment when theory, psychology, and philosophy converge into a lived, cinematic, emotional truth. The realization that confidence is not granted, it is constructed. The room feels different now. The hesitation that once clung to every decision, every movement, has softened. It's still there, of course, the fear, the uncertainty, the rawness of being human. But something new has emerged alongside it, the quiet hum of self-trust. It's a subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable. It's like the difference between standing at the edge of a cliff, paralyzed, and stepping forward despite the vertigo. The fall is still possible, but so is flight. The voice of doubt no longer has the same weight. The narrative has changed, and in this change, the man begins to see something fundamental. He is not waiting to become confident. He is choosing to become someone he trusts. This realization, that confidence is not a destination, but a practice, starts to crystallize into something concrete. It's not about pretending to be fearless or pretending to know all the answers. Confidence, as it turns out, is the product of self-integrity. It is about keeping promises to oneself, even when no one is watching. It is about showing up not because everything is easy or clear, but because you have learned to trust your own ability to handle the discomfort, the failure, the messiness of being human. It is the recognition that your worth is not conditional on success or failure, but on your ability to show up with honesty, humility, and commitment. In this shift, the concept of failure begins to transform. It is no longer a verdict on who you are, but an invitation to evolve. Each failure, each mistake, each moment of hesitation becomes an opportunity for growth, a feedback loop that shows you exactly where you need to lean in, where your strengths are hidden, and where you can stretch. Confidence is no longer about never falling, but about learning how to stand again. It's about having the courage to show up even when you're unsure of the outcome, because you trust that you can handle whatever comes. This internal shift, the choice to become the person you trust, requires a certain kind of audacity. It is an audacity not rooted in arrogance, but in self-respect. It is the audacity to keep promises, no matter how small. It is the audacity to act when the world is silent, to move when every part of you wants to freeze. It is the audacity to speak your truth, to set boundaries, to choose growth over comfort. This audacity is the foundation of self-trust. And once it is established, it becomes the very thing that carries you forward. The transformation from self-doubt to self-trust is not instant, but it is inevitable once the foundation has been laid. It is a process that unfolds in quiet moments. The decision to do what you said you would, even when it's hard. The courage to speak up, even when your voice trembles. The willingness to try again, even after failure. Each of these acts, no matter how small, is a vote for the person you want to become. And over time, they accumulate into something powerful, something unshakable. The unspoken knowledge that you can rely on yourself, that you have the resources, the resilience, the will to meet whatever challenges life presents. The cinematic rhythm of this transformation is subtle, almost imperceptible. It doesn't come in a single burst of clarity or a moment of dramatic triumph. It comes in fragments, in a decision made, in a promise kept, in a discomfort embraced. It's a gradual, almost imperceptible change that leads to an overwhelming sense of alignment. The person you were yesterday, the one riddled with doubt, procrastination, and fear, begins to fade into the distance, replaced by someone who is grounded in the knowledge that they can rely on themselves, no matter what. There is a beauty in this slow unfolding, in the way the self begins to integrate into a coherent whole. The fractured, uncertain parts of you, the parts that once recoiled from discomfort, from criticism, from failure, start to coalesce into something steady, something strong. It is not about becoming someone different, but about becoming more of who you already are. Someone capable, someone reliable, someone who chooses to trust their own instincts and decisions. In moments of challenge, when the world feels overwhelming and the path forward uncertain, this trust becomes your anchor. It is not the absence of fear that guides you, but the willingness to move despite it. Confidence is not a force you summon in isolation, but a companion you develop over time. Like any relationship, it requires care, patience, and honesty. It grows not through avoiding discomfort, but through leaning into it with the assurance that you can handle whatever comes. Viktor Frankl's teachings offer profound insight here. Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, argued that meaning in life is not found in external achievements, but in the choice of how we respond to the circumstances of our lives. He spoke of the ultimate freedom, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given situation. This freedom, Frankl suggested, is the foundation of self-determination and, by extension, confidence. Confidence is not about having the world at your feet, but about having the courage to face it, to engage with it fully, knowing that you are the one who decides how to respond. And here lies the true power of confidence. It is not a shield against fear, but the ability to walk alongside it. It is not about controlling the world, but about learning to trust the process of living, knowing that each step, no matter how uncertain, is a step toward the person you want to be. Each decision, each action, each moment of discomfort is an opportunity to reinforce the trust you have in yourself. And in doing so, you become someone who no longer needs external validation, who no longer depends on luck, circumstance, or approval to move forward. You become someone who knows, deep down, that you can handle whatever comes your way. This is the ultimate transformation, from someone who looks outside for validation to someone who looks within for strength. The realization that confidence is a product of self-trust, and self-trust is a choice made again and again, one moment at a time. It is a practice that grows stronger with each repetition, more resilient with each act of courage, more grounded with each decision made in alignment with your values. The cinematic effect is profound here. The once hesitant, unsure individual is now walking with greater clarity, greater purpose, and greater freedom. Not because the world has changed, but because their relationship with themselves has. The decisions that once felt daunting, sending the email, making the call, stepping into the unknown, no longer feel impossible. They are simply steps along the way, part of the process of becoming the person you trust, the person you can rely on to show up, no matter what. And in this realization, a new peace emerges. It is not the peace of perfection or certainty, but the peace that comes from knowing that you have the courage to keep going, no matter the outcome. The transformation is complete, but it is only the beginning. The work of self-trust continues, unfolding with each new challenge, each new moment of choice. But now, you walk with a steady assurance that the person you are becoming is someone you can rely on. And that, in the end, is the most powerful form of confidence there is.